Okay, so here we are. The Triumph Trident T160 is now finally finished after much work, any problems and so on, but we got through and we've got a lovely bike now sorted. So what have we learned really from having done the bike? We completely rebuilt the engine and so on. I think the first thing that we learned was obviously there's always mission creep on a bike. You know, he bought the bike, he wanted the engine rebuilt, but then we found out he needed a new rear sprocket, the rear brake was leaking, the rear caliper was seized, and so on. You know, little bits like that. There's always it's like, you know, more problems than you think. And then probably the most thing I've learned from doing this bike is actually the carburetors. Now, when the owner brought me this bike, he said, "Look, I don't want you to renew or change the carburetors because they're relatively new, and so that I'm sure they're going to be fine." So I said, "Okay." So as part of that, I naturally stripped the carbs down to clean them because when they've been standing, they can block up. So I stripped them all down and I gave them a really thorough clean, you know, poked through all the airways. I got my carb cleaner, I squirted it through all the airways and it came out of all the little holes. There's 2 little holes in the venturi and it came out of everywhere it should have come out, the carb cleaner. Great, put them all back together. And if you've been watching these series, you know that when I got the first start of the bike up, it just wouldn't run. It would run, but it would only run on full choke. And I couldn't work it out. It just as soon as you turn the choke off, I mean, it just died. The engine just simply would not run at all. And I had a thing where I was swapping the carbs over from my bike and so on and so on. Couldn't work it out at all. And in the end, we sent the carbs off. I had them re-sleeved, and I had the sort of air, the pilot jet drilled out. So on standard carbs, you've got the air screw on one side of the carburetor, and on the other side of the carburetor, it's blanked off. So what we had done, they drilled through into the airway, and then you can put a blanking plug in. That means you can get through and clean the pilot circuit out properly. On new Premier carbs, they have that already. They've got the screw on either side of the carb so you can clean things out. Anyway, we had that done, and sure enough, and the bike, and it ran perfectly. So it's been a bit of a shock. And I still can't quite get my head around it. I really can't. Is that I thought those carbs were totally fine. They all seemed to clean out properly, but they were blocked inside. So the question for me is, how do you know from cleaning a carb whether it's blocked or not? Because I was certain that those carbs were fine. I cleaned them all out. All the airways seemed clear, but they were blocked. I mean, and the dead giveaway that your pilot circuit is blocked is that when you turn the air screw to tune the carb, nothing happens. You know, if you're screwing it all the way in or all the way out, nothing. It doesn't change, and that way you're pretty sure that the airway, the pilot circuit is blocked. And that's what happened on these carbs. I did try tuning them, and sure enough, you know, nothing would happen with the screw going in or out. So that's been a bit of an eye-opener for me, because I thought, well, you know, clean the carbs out, they're clean, but no. And you know, how do you know that the carb is blocked? Because, you know, as far as I was concerned, carb cleaner came out everywhere it should have come out, but there you go. So that's been the main learning curve for me. Then the second thing, of course, as many of you will know, has been that it was burning oil. And so after I rebuilt, you know, the engineers had rebored the cylinders, rehoned them, we had oversized pistons, and they'd also done the cylinder head with that new valve guides fitted. We'd also had the crankshaft ground and so on, and the clutch balanced, and that was reground as well. But yeah, when it started, it just poured smoke out the back. Now, I thought that's smoking. You know, people said, well, you know, maybe it'll bed in and that, but I knew it was just pouring smoke out the back. It was, you know, really bad. There was a problem somewhere. It wasn't just, you know, that needed running in. Now, I then kind of jumped to a conclusion, and that was that it was the barrels hadn't been honed properly. There was a problem with the rings bedding in, and it wasn't that. Now, I'm not beating myself up about it because I wasn't really jumping to conclusion. I was using my sort of knowledge that I've gained on Tridents over the years, and that is that Tridents tend, for whatever reason, to smoke, especially from the rings and the barrels. They sort of give up a bit and they start to smoke, and they can smoke right from new, and that's exactly what happened to my Trident when exactly the same company did my Trident about 8 years ago. I put it back together and it smoked, and sure enough it was the barrels. I took it back, they rehoned it, I put new rings in, and it was fine. So I naturally kind of assumed it was the same problem with this, because A, Tridents have this propensity to smoke even from new, and it's the rings, and the same thing that happened to my bike. So of course we rebuilt it, did all that, new rings and so on, and of course it still smoked. But of course the other thing I thought of, well, is that engineers, they've done something wrong, because I was beginning to lose faith with them. They've done a couple of things that haven't been right for me, and I'm beginning to question their work. So that was another thing that made me think it was the barrels, because they'd done it wrong on my bike. But of course what I didn't realise was, of course, I had done it wrong, but not with the barrels, but with fitting the valve guides. In retrospect, yeah, when I took it apart the first time, I should have maybe taken the valves out and checked it. But, you know, all the indications were that the problems were with the barrels and the honing and the new rings. But, you know, so you shouldn't jump to conclusions. But, you know, in my case, as I say, I used my pre-knowledge, the knowledge I've gained to think, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the barrels. Of course, the problem with something like smoking engine is there's nothing broken necessarily to find. I mean, there was actually like broken, the actual valve guides were loose, and if I'd have inspected them, yeah. But you can't just like take the barrels off and say, oh no, they're fine actually. They're not a problem, because you know, it's one of those. You know, if something's broken, then you can fix it. But something like smoking, you have to try and work out what the problem is. Anyway, so lesson learned there that even with my sort of existing knowledge, I perhaps jumped to conclusions. Perhaps I should have checked the head at the same time. What I certainly should have done, in retrospect, was to block off the oil feed to the head before I took it apart. Because the second time, when it still smoked, I blocked off the feed to the rockers, only temporarily obviously, started the bike up, no smoke. And that conclusively pointed to the fact that the head was the problem. Now, if I'd have done that the first time, then I'd have realised, oh no, it's not the barrels that's the problem, as I thought, it must be the head. I've got the bins being emptied now, don't worry. So we've got a bit of bin noise. Yeah, so those are the main things. You know, it's been a long road, but you know, you have to look at each problem you have is like, you know, it's an what would I say, as a teacher, former teacher, it's a learning opportunity. You know, look upon it as a learning opportunity. You know, you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't had that problem. You know, looking back, you can say, yeah, okay. At the time, you just feel like getting the shotgun out, you know. Either to the bike or to yourself, really. But anyway, yeah. So, yeah, I'm very pleased with it. I'll start it up for you now. I'm only going to start it briefly. I'm glad the bin's being done now. Not. I'm only going to start it up briefly because we're down in the basement. And bear in mind that, and I'm starting it from cold. It's not been on at all. But bear in mind that there's on the camera, for some reason, there's something on the microphone that when it gets a loud noise, it kind of suppresses it. And it always makes it sound like the bike's like running underwater, which is a shame, but I don't know a way of overriding it, you know. So just be aware that it always sounds, you know, it sounds great. And then you listen to it back on the camera, it's like it's underwater. Anyway, there we go. We'll start it up so you can have a listen. You'll notice that there's no smoke at all coming out of the exhaust. And we'll just so you can have a listen, and just so I can show it off a bit, because it's running really well. That's the thing. At the end of all this, it's running very well, so I'm very pleased. It's been worth it, and I know the owners are very happy with it. Okay. So that's about it from me. Before I start the bike up, I'm going to say job done. Thanks for watching all the videos. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed watching them. And let's hope that, you know, everyone can enjoy this bike now. You know, it's been rebuilt, and so it's there for people to look at, for the owner to ride and enjoy, and so, you know, it's been a positive all round. Okay, so I'm going to start the bike up now just so you can listen to it. It's cold, but hopefully it should start pretty well anyway. So what we're going to do ignition on, petrol on, tickle the carbs. Now, it does, you know, they are AML Mark 1s, they like tickling, whether it's hot or cold. You've got the centre tickler lever on a T160, so you don't have to try and tickle the centre carb with your finger. Right, okay, all three carbs tickled. I'm going to put it on full choke because it's always cold down here in the basement, and we'll give it a zap, and hopefully we'll be okay. Brilliant. Just, that runs so nicely. Just very happy. There you go. And goodbye from me. Goodbye from the bike. It's being picked up tomorrow. Hurrah!